In his comprehensive and wide-ranging book, The Believing Brain, Michael Shermer explores the psychological, neurological, and evolutionary underpinnings of human belief formation. Shermer's central argument is that the human brain is, first and foremost, a belief engine, a pattern recognition machine that evolved to identify meaningful patterns in the environment and imbue those patterns with intention, meaning, and agency. This tendency to form beliefs and then justify them post hoc with rational arguments may have been adaptive for our ancestors, but it leaves us vulnerable to self-deception, cognitive biases, and flawed reasoning. To explain how our brains construct and reinforce beliefs, Shermer introduces two key concepts: patternicity and agenticity. Patternicity refers to the brain's inclination to perceive meaningful patterns in both meaningful and meaningless data. In essence, it's a type of cognitive error where we incorrectly reject the null hypothesis, assuming a pattern is real when it is not. But in the ancestral environment, the cost of believing a pattern was real when it wasn't. A false positive, or type 1 error, was less than the cost of believing a pattern was false when it was real, a false negative, or type 2 error. For example, assuming a rustling in the grass is caused by the wind when it's actually a predator could prove fatal, while assuming the rustling is caused by a predator when it's really just the wind carries little cost. As a result, natural selection favored brains that erred on the side of assuming patterns are real rather than not. Agenticity, on the other hand, refers to our propensity to infuse patterns with meaning, intention, and agency, often in the form of invisible agents like souls, spirits, ghosts, gods, demons, angels, aliens, intelligent designers, and conspiracies. When combined with patternicity, agenticity forms the cognitive basis for humanity's widespread belief in the supernatural, including animism, polytheism, and monotheism. Shermer notes that even atheists are not immune to agenticity, often ascribing events to the machinations of powerful but hidden entities like government conspiracies. At the neural level, Shermer explains that our perceptions are not the result of the brain passively recording sensory data from the world, but are actively constructed based on our prior beliefs and expectations. The brain interprets incoming sensory information through the lens of what it already believes, leading to what Shermer terms belief-dependent realism, the notion that our understanding of reality is inextricably dependent on, and often distorted by, the beliefs we hold. The brain then employs an array of powerful cognitive biases to ensure that our beliefs are confirmed and reinforced. One of the most pervasive and powerful of these biases is the confirmation bias, our predilection for seeking out and focusing on evidence that confirms what we already believe while ignoring, minimizing, or rationalizing away evidence that contradicts our beliefs. Other potent biases include the hindsight bias, the tendency to reconstruct our memories of the past after an event to make it seem like we knew it all along. The self-justification bias, our inclination to rationalize and defend our past decisions and actions to maintain a positive self-image. And the attribution bias, our pattern of attributing different causes to our own beliefs and behaviors than to others' beliefs and behaviors. Together, these biases function to reinforce our existing beliefs and shield them from contradictory evidence. Shermer argues that this tendency to form quick intuitive beliefs and only later justify them with reason was likely adaptive in our ancestral environment. For much of human history, survival often depended on making rapid decisions based on incomplete information. Taking too long to rationally weigh the evidence before deciding whether a noise indicated a lurking predator could quite literally mean the difference between life and death. As a result, we've evolved to make fast assumptions, take mental shortcuts, and assume we're right until definitively proven wrong, a tendency that serves us well in many situations, but can lead us astray when careful analysis is required. At the level of brain chemistry, Shermer elucidates the role of the neurotransmitter dopamine in forming and reinforcing beliefs. When the brain identifies a pattern, it is rewarded with a release of dopamine, reinforcing the pattern-finding behavior. Dopamine levels must be carefully titrated, however. Too little dopamine leads to insufficient salience detection and a tendency to miss real patterns, while too much dopamine can trigger hyperactive patternicity, manifesting as schizophrenia, paranoia, and conspiratorial ideation. Building on these cognitive, neurological, and psychological foundations, Shermer explores how specific categories of extraordinary beliefs form and persist. In the case of belief in God, Shermer argues we are hardwired to perceive intentional agency in the world, citing twin studies indicating that 40–50% of the variance in belief in God is attributable to genetic factors. This innate predisposition is then molded by cultural transmission and personal psychology. Many believers, like the geneticist Francis Collins, report pivotal personal experiences where they suddenly and certainly apprehended God's presence and intention in their lives. For Collins, feeling that God had placed a frozen waterfall in his path as a personal sign. Shermer contends that belief in the afterlife arises from several cognitive propensities, a form of agenticity that leads us to believe our personal essence or identity will survive the death of the body. Dualistic intuitions that the mind is fundamentally distinct from the physical brain. Our theory of mind capacity to imagine minds existing independent of bodies. An innate ability to imagine ourselves outside our bodies. And the confabulatory role of the left hemisphere interpreter in weaving these intuitions into a coherent narrative. When it comes to belief in extraterrestrial beings, Shermer suggests that the popular image of humanoid aliens reflects deep-seated assumptions about the nature of intelligence, more than the probable reality of alien life. The SETI project's core premise, that aliens would communicate via radio transmissions, for instance, exhibits a form of carbon chauvinism, or temporal provincialism. And while our universe does appear exquisitely fine-tuned for the emergence of life and intelligence, this apparent design may simply reflect an observational selection effect. We find ourselves in one of the rare universes in a vast multiverse whose physical constants happen to fall within the narrow range that allows complex life to evolve. In the realm of politics, Shermer argues that liberal and conservative thought patterns arise from differing emphasis on 5 foundational moral intuitions: harm and care, fairness and reciprocity, in-group and loyalty, authority and respect, purity and sanctity. Liberals tend to prioritize individual protection, fairness, and caring for the vulnerable, while conservatives place greater emphasis on in-group solidarity, deference to authority, and concerns about purity. Crucially, Shermer argues these moral foundations are more emotional than rational. We feel them first and then construct rational justifications for our liberal or conservative worldviews after the fact. Shermer favors a realistic view that 40–50% of the variation in human personality and political orientation is rooted in genes, with the remainder shaped by personal experience and culture. Perhaps the most insidious cognitive bias of all is the bias blind spot, our tendency to believe we are less biased than others. We readily detect motivated reasoning, self-serving biases, and distorted thinking in others, but often fail to recognize the influence of these same biases on our own beliefs and perceptions. The only reliable corrective, Shermer argues, is the scientific method, a set of practices and institutions carefully designed to help identify and minimize the impact of cognitive biases on our thinking. The book concludes with an exploration of the often fraught relationship between science and belief. Shermer contends that a scientific worldview grounded in belief-dependent realism is superior to paranormal or supernaturalistic belief systems when it comes to explaining seemingly mysterious phenomena. The sensed presence of an invisible companion commonly reported in near-death experiences, for instance, can be reliably elicited by electrically stimulating certain regions of the temporal lobes. Cases of alien abduction and out-of-body experiences likely represent neurological anomalies rather than genuine perceptions of immaterial realms. Shermer grapples with perhaps the profoundest unsolved mystery in science, the question of why our universe exists at all, and how it came to exhibit its seemingly miraculous suitability for life. While acknowledging the intuitive pull of God as an ultimate explanation, Shermer argues the best current scientific answer may be the concept of the multiverse. Our universe could be one of innumerable bubble universes that nucleate into existence out of primordial quantum fluctuations, each with its own distinctive and mostly life-prohibiting set of physical laws and constants. The apparent fine-tuning of our universe for life wouldn't be surprising if ours was simply one of the rare universes in a vast multiverse ensemble whose physical constants happen to fall within the vanishingly narrow range that allows matter to coalesce, stars and planets to form, and complex life to evolve. Some theorists have even proposed a process analogous to natural selection operating on universes, where universes that generate lots of black holes spawn more progeny universes with similar life-friendly physical constants. Ultimately, Shermer holds up the scientific method as the most powerful tool humanity has devised for overcoming our cognitive frailties and arriving at reliable knowledge about the world and ourselves. Science proceeds by provisionally assuming claims are false until they have been demonstrated otherwise with convincing empirical evidence. The null hypothesis, whether investigating claims of psychic abilities, alien visitations, or the existence of a supreme being, science demands independent empirical corroboration before granting even tentative credence to extraordinary claims. Absolute, immutable truth will always remain elusive, but the self-correcting cumulative practices of science represent our best hope for discovering provisional truths about the nature of reality, the universe, and the human mind. The truth is out there, Shermer assures us, even if the belief-generating mechanisms of our brains make it infuriatingly difficult to discern.